Actually, um, uh, welcome, Daniele Amoroso. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay, Luciano, and thank you very much. Thanks to you and to all the members of the Center for Meaningful Human Control at TU Delft, or for this invitation. It's always a pleasure and an honor for me to interact with you guys, with your community of researchers. That's very an enticing and stimulating environment. So I'm pretty aware that the topic of autonomous weapon systems has already been dealt with in some previous presentations, some previous seminars, including by Giulio, that I see is here with us. But fortunately, this is obvious because the very notion of meaningful human control was born in that context. But as you said, Luciano, in the unrecorded part of this seminar, I will try to add a different lens on a different perspective, the one of a lawyer, an international lawyer specifically. And as you can see from the slide, the legal framework against which I will analyze autonomous weapon system is the most obvious one. So international humanitarian law, so the laws of war, which is the natural context where we should analyze the legality of these systems, and also, as we will see in the second part of this presentation, the issue of meaningful human control. You may well know, and so I will be quite quick on this, that the main diplomatic forum where this issue has been debated so far is the group of governmental experts on lethal autonomous weapon system that has been meeting generally twice a year in Geneva, which was established under a specific convention of international humanitarian law, the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. Just to understand, it is a framework convention which facilitates the adoption of new protocols banning certain weapons like blinding lasers, or regulating others like incendiary weapons. So far, this group of governmental experts has just produced as an output a soft law instrument, so the 11 guiding principles on lethal autonomous weapon systems. And this is why the campaign to stop killer robots is quite dissatisfied with this evolution, and is trying to move the discussion also in New York at the UN General Assembly. So what do we mean by autonomous weapon systems? Again, I'm pretty sure that most of you have a clear idea about it. So the core of the definition around which there is a surprising convergence of view among different stakeholders is that an autonomous weapon system is a weapon system that is able, once activated, to select and engage targets without human intervention. So the focus, the core, is on autonomy and the performance of the critical functions of selecting and engaging targets. Two clarifications. First of all, there is no reference to artificial intelligence in this definition. So artificial intelligence is certainly an enabler of more and more sophisticated and autonomous weapon system, but it is not a requirement for a weapon systems to be autonomous. And second, and relatedly, this is a functional, technology neutral definition, which is quite over-inclusive. So it covers also many systems that have been here for decades without raising any kind of issue. And this is shown by this slide, where we can see some systems that qualify as autonomous under this definition, such as air defensive systems, or also some very specific kind of advanced fire and forget munitions, those that capable of targeting autonomously object within a kill area, kill box defined by the human operators. The most ethically troublesome are perhaps the sentry robots, so which can directly, allegedly are capable of autonomously targeting humans, trespassing the Korean demilitarized zone, and this is definitely the most used in contemporary conflicts. We have loitering munitions. So loitering munitions are also called kamikaze drones, suicide drones. So they combined the feature of missiles and drones. They are able to hover to search for an area for hours before identifying targets and dive bombing on it. All these examples are quite old ones. So if you are curious about new types and new kind of systems that qualifies as autonomous, it's suffices that you just go on the web and search on the website of some defense producers, such as Anduril, which has an updated list of weapons like this, like many variants of loitering munitions, for instance. But the core is that. In addition to this kind of systems, we should refer to a couple of important developments, such as the DARPA experiments on autonomous jet fighting. So we have these dogfights between an autonomous jet and a human-piloted jet. And in 2024, the autonomous jet managed to win against very experienced pilots. So this was an important breakthrough in this technology. And then we have, these are very well known, the swarm of micro drones. So the idea, and I don't have to explain that to you, is to ensure coordination without centralized control, to confuse air defenses, saturate targets, and adapt decision in real time. So these evolutions, in particular loitering munitions and swarm of micro drones, raise more pressing legal and ethical questions. And this is why we are here talking about this topic. So after this definitional introduction, let's say something about what the law says, what the existing law says about autonomous weapon systems. So it is all too obvious to start this analysis from a provision of the first additional protocol to the Geneva Convention, which is titled New Weapons, Article 36. This provision requires that in the study, development, acquisition, or adoption of a new weapon, states must determine whether the use of this new weapon would be prohibited under international law. So this is a legal gatekeeping mechanism. So if a state is developing a new weapon, it must ensure that it complies with IHL, International Humanitarian Law, before it's deployed. It is important to underline here that such a review is not necessarily limited to a green light or a red light. So because you know the references to some or all circumstances, so it means that it is possible that we have a conditional approval. So that a certain weapon system, an autonomous weapon system, could be lawfully employed just under certain specific circumstances or operational constraints. The relevance of this provision for autonomous weapon system is confirmed by the guiding principles I referred before. So the only international instrument we have so far about autonomous weapon systems, which reproduces, so the guiding principle reproduce almost word by word the text of Article 36 and applies it to autonomous weapon system. So now traditionally, Article 36 reviews, or the legal reviews of weapons, focused on an assessment as to whether a weapon violated the cardinal principles of weapons law, such as the prohibition of indiscriminate weapons or of unnecessary suffering, or if the weapon was against some specific prohibition, such as a anti-personnel mine, or it was a chemical weapon, or whatever. So this was the traditional way to apply this kind of legal reviews. But as it was said in the early stages of it was noted in the early stages of the debate on autonomous weapon systems, we have here a different challenge. So when we apply weapons review to autonomous weapon systems, something new is added, because these weapon systems are, in principle, entrusted with the performance of the entire targeting process. So as a consequence of it, we must not just ask ourselves whether the weapon complies with certain rules of weapons law, but also we should verify whether the weapons is capable of complying with targeting law, with the norms of international humanitarian law, which govern the targeting process. And in this respect, two are the norms that primarily come into play. So the principle of distinction and the principle of proportionality. Okay, so let's start with the principle of distinction. The normative content of this principle is very easy. The belligerent cannot direct attacks against civilians and civilian objects. They can just target military objectives, combatants. In addition to this, we have other norms that raise distinction issues, the most important of which is the prohibition against attacking enemies hors de combat. So enemies that are surrendering or are defenseless because they are wounded, they are sick, they are unconscious. So turning this principle to an assessment of the legality of autonomous weapon system, what we should ask is, are autonomous weapon systems capable of distinguishing between legitimate targets and protected persons and objects? Or so can they classify correctly what they see, so in one of these categories, so legitimate target or protected person? To unpack this problem, we can distinguish the distinction task into three categories. So we have in the first place recognition tasks that are tractable by autonomous weapon system. So autonomous weapon systems are capable of identifying cooperative targets, so targets that emit signals, such as radars. The oldest loitering munition, the RPNG, is basically grounded in this kind of technology, the capability of identifying enemy radars. We also have certain targets or protected persons whose identification is made easier by the very norms of international humanitarian law. So just consider the Red Cross that should be showed on medical units, or the Blue Shield on cultural heritage. So the autonomous weapon system, which is capable of recognizing these distinctive signs, should be able to carry out a distinction analysis that is lawful. Also, contemporary technologies are certainly capable of distinguishing objects that are military objectives by their nature, such as missiles, rockets, tanks, etc. We also have a second category of tasks that are challenging but still achievable, such as the recognition of enemies that are defenseless or surrendering, and for this reason are protected from attacks. And finally, we have perceptual challenges, which are still problematic for autonomous image recognition, such as civilians who lost their protection because are directly participating in hostilities, or civilian objects which become military objectives because of their use or or intended use, and in general, all recognition tasks in environment that are unstructured and dynamic, such as urban warfare scenario. Having said that, it is also important to underline that even if currently AI does not outperform consistently humans in these harder cases, so the one in red, this is a gap that is not necessarily insurmountable. So I think it is contingent, and you could confirm it, on the state of technological development. The thing stands quite differently as we come to the second principle of targeting law, proportionality. So in short, this principle has to do with the cases where an attack is carried out against a legitimate objective, but it is expected to cause a collateral damage, so an incidental damage to civilians. In this case, the attack can be carried out only if the collateral damage is not excessive in relation to the military advantage anticipated. So we can dissect within this principle three analytical steps. First of all, we have the collateral damage estimation. Then we have the assessment of the military advantage. And finally, we have a comparison between the two, aimed at verifying whether the collateral damage would be excessive. So the first step is already performed by software. So there are many software in use, for instance, by the US Army that reliably calculate collateral damage. Things stand quite differently when we move to military advantage assessment. Sometimes it can be straightforward to verify whether there is a military advantage ensuing from a certain attack, but some other times there would be issues similar to those we mentioned in relation to distinction. So if there is a civilian object which is a dual use object and then can also provide a military advantage, so its destruction can provide a military advantage, then there is a difficulty for the weapon to distinguish this from another civilian object. But the most important challenge is that the proportionality assessment also requires a value judgment, so to assign a weight to the advantage expected from the destruction of a certain military objective, because this weight should be balanced with the weight of the collateral damage that is also anticipated as a consequence of the attack. So the core of the principle is here in the determination of excessiveness. And this is quite unsuitable to be codified, to be programmed into a code. And this is, unlike the principle of distinction, where we clearly have a right answer. So a person either is a civilian or it is not. We do not have here a reference answer, the correct answer. The standard that is relied on in international law is the standard of the reasonable military commanders. This standard creates a zone of lawful discretion. So two military commanders can make different calls regarding proportionality, and still these different calls can both be lawful because they are within this area of lawful discretion. So this difficulty has been recognized also by supporters of autonomous weapon systems that concede that proportionality assessment should be made by humans at the moment of planning the attack instead of the machine during the attack. But even if we imagine a future AI system which is capable, which is trained to perform proportionality assessment, it is largely unclear what humanitarian gain one could obtain from it. Because since the law allows for a range of lawful judgments, it is impossible to compare performance. So what would mean that a machine balances better than a human if the different balancing decisions are all lawful, provided that they are within the zone of discretion defined by the reasonable military commander standard. So one should lower the expectations as to the humanitarian benefits of relinquishing determination of excessiveness to machine. And to conclude the analysis of what the law says, I'll introduce another important principle of targeting law, which is the principle of precaution. At its core, the principle of precaution is about doing everything feasible to prevent the violation on the other principles, so distinction or proportionality, before the attack. It is a positive obligation. So one should, so the attacking party, also the defending one, but let's now focus on the attacking party, should do everything feasible to prevent the violation from occurring. From this principle, a number of obligations can be inferred, the most important of which for our purposes are two. First, the obligation to do everything feasible to ensure that the selected target is a legitimate military objective. And second, the obligation to ensure control during the execution of the attack so that it is possible, even after the attack is launched, to suspend or cancel it if it becomes apparent that the target is not a legitimate one or that the incidental damage to civilians could be excessive. So what are the implications of this principle for autonomous weapon systems? Well, I don't have to tell this audience how machines, how AI-based systems can fail. You know better than I do that even when machines outperform consistently humans in specific tasks, they are still prone to serious counterintuitive mistakes that a human would have never made. The legal implication of this is quite apparent if we consider that in the context of the battlefield, this kind of counterintuitive mistakes can be an attack against a school, an attack against the civilian population. So from the perspective of the principle of precaution, and thus of the obligation to do everything feasible to ensure lawful targeting decisions, so it makes no sense to either let the machine, the weapon system, handle the entire targeting process, or to remove wholly the machine from it. So the truth is somewhere in between. States should focus on building models of human-machine teaming that are designed to compensate their reciprocal weaknesses. Now, please remember that the obligation deriving from the principle of precaution are subject to feasibility. So it is not possible to derive from the principle of precaution some unfeasible obligation, which means that the principle of precaution does not demand to keep a human in the loop if it can cause security risks, such as is the case of an air defensive system that has to protect an area from saturation attacks. So a human-machine interaction that requires the human to decide on each and every targeting decision could create a security risk that would be unacceptable and unfeasible, and so it is not required under international humanitarian law. So let's try to wrap up the discussion of this first part. Then, Luciano, you will tell me how much time still I have for the second part. So what the law says. Based on what I said regarding Article 36, that the weapons review, a legal review, so an autonomous weapon system could have as an outcome a conditional approval, we can say that a conditional approval applies here. So we should distinguish the kind of scenarios where the weapon system is deployed and the kind of mission that he is assigned. So in cluttered scenarios, in dynamic scenarios such as urban warfare, the issues of distinction and proportionalities must be addressed in advance by human commanders at the moment of the planning. So this, which is called in the military jargon as deliberate targeting. On the other hand, unplanned dynamic targeting can be carried out by autonomous weapon system solely in scenarios where civilians are absent or are clearly detached from military objectives. And in any case, and this as a consequence of the principle of precaution, whenever civilians are present, human supervision and approval or veto should be maintained as a fail-safe mechanism aimed at avoiding unlawful targeting decisions, of course, subject to feasibility. And still, of course, this obligation, this requirement of human supervision and approval should add something to the quality of the decision-making process. So, and I know that this is something that you know far better than me, human operators should be trained in order not to succumb to heuristics such as automation bias and others. And also technology should be designed in a way to optimize human-machine interaction. So, Luciano, tell me, how much time do I have for the second part? It will be shorter.
Yeah, 10 minutes or something with 10, 12, then I have time to for
I think it will be enough.
I have some questions already. I'm sure the others also do.
I think it will be enough. So let's move to how the law could be improved. So the first question that one can legitimately arise is, well, after all, what I've described is quite a reasonable legal framework, which can be derived from existing law. So do we actually need new law? So why a growing number of states and NGOs, and also, for instance, the UN Secretary General and the President of the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, have been insisting upon the adoption of a new legally binding instrument on autonomous weapon system? Well, I think there are three reasons for this. First of all, even if one could consider the conclusion of the first section on what the law says as reasonable, they are far from obvious from the text of the relevant text of international humanitarian law. That can be controversial. They are far from being explicit. So it is important, would be important to introduce a new legally binding instrument to make this requirement explicit and operationally clear, and no longer subject to interpretative controversy. Second, a new legally binding instrument could introduce new norms that, even if cannot be derived from the existing legal framework, are still grounded in some shared ethical conviction. And this is the case on the proposal for a ban on autonomous weapon systems that target human beings as their primary objective. And finally, a new legal instrument is important for ensure the effective implementation of these norms by introducing, mechanism of confidence building, transparency, peer review, monitoring, and etc. So what are the proposals on the tables? I will try to go quite quick on this. The most important, the most influential so far proposal is the one coming from the ICRC, which came after a long reflection of almost a decade. The ICRC proposal, which was published in 2021, is based on a two-tier approach. So we have prohibitions plus regulation. The prohibitions are on anti-personnel autonomous weapon systems and weapon systems that are by design unpredictable. And for all other autonomous weapon systems, we have a number of constraints, of operational constraints, such as the limits on the types of target that the autonomous weapon system can seek for and engage, such as military objectives by nature, or limits on the duration of the autonomy, the geographical scope, the scale of use, limits on situation of use. For instance, scenarios where there are no civilians or civilians are clearly detached from military objectives. And in addition to this, the requirement of human supervision and veto. So a couple of notes of comments about this proposal. As you can see, it largely, so the proposal by the ICRC largely clarifies and confirms what one can infer from existing international humanitarian law by making explicit, among other things, the requirement of human involvement. The only main innovation would be the ban on anti-personnel autonomous weapon system, which is based on human dignity concerns. And finally, for our disappointment, there is no express reference to meaningful human control, but even if it is so, one can easily find out that this proposal can be a way to operationalize meaningful human control, even if without using this term for diplomatic reason. An important development which has been characterizing the last couple of years of debate in Geneva is the circulation by the chair of the group of governmental experts of a rolling text. So a text in evolution that is changed at each session of the group on the basis of the inputs coming from the various delegations wishing to comment on it, and that could become the basis for a legally binding text on autonomous weapon system. Two notes on this rolling text. On the one hand, we have several, so you can see an excerpt of it. You can see from this excerpt that there are many references to operational constraints similar to those envisaged by the International Committee of the Red Cross in its position paper. But also, we have the introduction of this requirement, which is clearly inspired by meaningful human control, even if there is no reference to meaningfulness. There's the context-appropriate human judgment and control. So it should be noted that even if this requirement pops up in many places of the rolling text. There is no definition of it. So the chair circulated a text trying to explain something about this requirement, but it says not much, to say the least. So one can legitimately question what makes human judgment and control appropriate to the context. So the idea, which I totally subscribe to, is that meaningful human control or human judgment and control is not a one-fits-all requirement, but should be fine-tuned to the context of use. So, and it is my opinion that to this end, so in order to assess the contextual appropriateness of this human control, we should consider three properties. So the what, the where, and how properties of the system. So what the system is programmed to do. So if it is an offensive or a defensive system, or of its assigned target, so it has to target military objectives by nature, or by use or purpose, or armed combatants, and so on and so forth. Where the system is deployed, so the features of the operational environment, first and foremost, the presence or absence of civilians, and how the system works. So what sensory motor capabilities and data processing techniques it relies on to carry out its missions. In particular, if this feature can lead to emergent unpredictable behavior, such as in the case of swarming or deep learning. And so the idea is that the greater the legal and ethical concern are raised by these properties, the mission, the operational setting, the technical feature of the autonomous weapon system, the stricter will be the level of human control needed for it to be contextually appropriate. So just a couple of notes before concluding. So I think I managed to stay in the 10 minutes assigned. So how many chances we have? So what chances we have to adopt a legally binding instrument as advocated, among others, by the UN Secretary General? So based on the automated research website that is a very much updated and detailed in information it provides, there are no less than 129 states supporting the adoption of such instrument. Consider that 129 states are roughly the number of state parties to the CCW, to this Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, even if the two group of states do not overlap. So it seems that it is quite a good number of states, but you should consider that among the 12 that opposes this kind of instrument, we have United States, Israel, India, Russia, and Australia. So we have many states that many militarily significant powers that are quite advanced in their AI military research. So what is the risk? The risk is that we have a legally binding instrument such as the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that exist, that made some people win a Nobel Prize, but that is ultimately useless on a normative level because it has not been ratified by any nuclear power in the world. So what could be the second best? And here it comes the reference by Luciano on my involvement in the update of the Italian military manual on IHL, on International Humanitarian Law. So this is an important element of state practice where there are discussions about new technologies and where it is possible to orient the attitude of the Ministry of Defenses, of the military regarding a certain a certain topic, such as the legality of autonomous weapon system. And since there are a number of IHL military manuals that are in the course of being updated in these years, that could be an arena where we can try to lobby people interested in doing this can try to lobby towards an adoption of rules that are similar to those envisaged by the ICRC or the rolling text by the chair of the group of governmental experts. This is what I've tried to do when I drafted the rule on autonomous weapon systems that is going to be published in the military manual. Is still under a review by the Ministry of the Defense, so I don't know how things will go, and this is why this top secret its content. But that if there are many military manuals pointing in this direction, this could be a kind of convergence of unilateral state practice that can lead to some shared practice and rules on autonomous weapon system, which is the second best, but not the worst that we can opt for in this moment of huge crisis of multilateralism. Thank you for your attention, and please make me all the terrible question that you usually make to your guest.